Hi everyone, okay, this is Alexei Shirov against Magnus Carlsen, which was played at the M-Tel Masters tournament in Sofia earlier today. It was the final round of the tournament, with Carlsen needing only a draw to either tie for first place if Topalov won his game, or win the tournament outright, and unfortunately that didn't happen, and Alexei Shirov won after a small miscalculation from Carlsen. It was a sharp game anyway, as you'll see. So Shirov had the white pieces, and he opened with e4, to which Carlsen replied c5, and after knight f3 he played knight c6, which he'd also played against Ivanchuk in the 8th round of the tournament, and he's intending to go into the Sveshnikov variation of the Sicilian defense, which followed after d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, and e5. Then came knight on b to d5, d6, and bishop g5. And this game is all book up until the 18th move, and the main thing to consider in this position is that by playing e5 after having played c5 already, black's created this bad weakness on d5, and Shirov's last move with bishop g5 intends to exchange off this knight, which is defending d5, and then play his knight on c3 to d5, which would be a strong piece. And that's more or less what happened. After a6, knight a3 and b5, threatening to fork the knights with b4. So bishop takes f6, g takes f6, which is sharper and better, all things considered, than capturing with the queen. If Carlsen had played that, we'll say queen takes f6, then knight d5, which threatens the queen, and also knight c7 check, picking up the rook. Winning at least the exchange would force queen d8, and black has a bad loss of tempo, like the game might continue c5, queen a5 check, queen d2, b4, knight c2, rook b8, and bishop e2, etc., which is better in any case for white, and he's almost a pawn up in terms of position. So g takes f6 is better, and also the opening of the g file is good for attack. So then came knight g5, bishop g7, bishop d3, and knight e7 is getting rid of this strong knight on d5. It's a good idea. So knight takes e7, queen takes e7, c4, f5, white castle, black castled, queen h5, and rook b8, which is threatening to take on e4, which couldn't have been done before. Like say if he plays f takes e4 now, then bishop takes c4, which threatens both mate on h7 and the rook on a8, and Carlsen would be forced to play f5, and after bishop takes a8 the game's lost. So rook b8 threatens to take on e4. Then comes e takes f5, e4, rook a, e1, preventing black from taking the bishop because of the pin on the queen. Bishop b7 and queen g4, which is the last book move of the game. And so it's a very double-edged position. Black has the two bishops and the open g file to work with as compensation for his sacrificed pawn. And here he sacrificed another two pawns in order to get a strong center with rook fe8, c takes b5. And if instead at this stage f3, then black has a strong reply, h5, and he has good compensation for a sacrificed pawn after this continuation. These are all the moves that Fritz recommends. Yeah, bishop takes f5, and here black would have a passed pawn, the two bishops, and the initiative, because the queen's going to have to move, and it's definitely good enough compensation for the pawn. So c takes b5 anyway at this stage, and then d5, and bishop takes a6, and bishop c6. So now Carlsen is 3 pawns down, but his center, the bishop pair, and the initiative give him at least half of that material back in terms of position. So b3, because this pawn is threatened, and king h8, preparing to use the open g file, which in combination with the bishop on c6 aiming at g2 could be very dangerous. Knight c2 and bishop e5. Fritz didn't like this move as much as bishop c3, which I thought was slightly stronger. The game might have continued here, rook e3, queen f6, bishop e2, d4, and white's forced to give up the exchange due to the threats of the position, and d takes c3, knight e3, where white would have 3 pawns for the exchange, and the game would be just about equal. Again, Carlsen would have had a pass pawn, which would give him enough compensation for being down in material. So bishop e5 is what Magnus played anyway, and then came bishop e2 and d4, just opening up this dangerous diagonal for the bishop. And here Fritz thinks black has a strong enough position to compensate for one of the sacrificed pawns, but not more than that. So bishop c4, rook g8, queen h3, which is to protect the vulnerable g3 square, and it looks more passive than queen h5, which was the other alternative. But after e3, g3, queen d6, the queen would have to come back to h3 anyway, so Shirov avoided the loss of tempo and played queen h3 at this stage instead. So rook g7, g3, rook b g8, queen h6, and now it's a very sharp position with sacrifices on g3 looking very strong. But Carlsen first had to defend his bishop on c6 here from the queen, and blocking with bishop f6 is no good because the bishop is a key attacking piece. And what Carlsen played here was queen c7, but he seemingly hadn't accounted for the strong continuation knight b4, which is what Shirov played. But if at this stage, instead of queen c7, he played bishop a8, the continuation that Fritz gave for both sides here for white was a3, which is really a passive looking move, and maybe Shirov wouldn't have played this seeing the threats of the position, but there isn't much more he can do to defend his king, and if he had played something like that, then there would come queen c7, and after knight b4, which is the strongest move in the position, and bishop f4, threatening the queen, and the pawn can't take because it's pinned, queen h5, and then bishop takes g3, f takes g3, rook takes g3 check, and king h1 is the only move. If h takes g3, then queen takes g3 check, and king h1, queen g2 is mate, and if instead king f2, then simply rook g2 is mate as well. So king h1 would be the only move here, and then could come rook 3 g5, queen h3, queen e5, and now black has the advantage despite being a knight and a pawn down. Bishop e2 is the move that Fritz recommends, after which could come e3 with check from the bishop, bishop f3, e2, bishop takes a8, e takes f1 check, and queen takes f1 is forced. If the rook recaptures at this stage, then it's mate in 5, and here black would be able to play rook takes f5, and the queen is tied to the defense of this rook here, and also to the defense of mate if the queen takes the rook, and white would have to give up the queen here in order to stop the mate threats, and Fritz recommends bishop d5 here because the bishop is unprotected on e8, and after the exchanges that follow, it would have been in danger there. But in this position, of course, would come rook takes f1 check, and rook takes f1, and black has a winning advantage. So this is the kind of attack that Carlsen was preparing, and it's just very unfortunate that he missed the knight b4 move from Shirov, which forced him to retreat and scuppered all of his attacking chances. Although there was that one passive looking move that Fritz recommended, but there really was nothing more that Shirov could have done to defend. Bringing his queen back wouldn't have helped, and there was no way this knight could be brought in, and the rooks were behind the pawns here, they couldn't move further over, so it seems that Carlsen could well have won this game. But as it happened in the game, after queen c7 here from Carlsen, came rook b4, and now this bishop is attacked twice, so bishop a8 was played with loss of tempo because that could have been played the move before, and Shirov now followed up with knight d5, which closes this dangerous diagonal for the bishop and forces the queen to retreat to d8, and now Shirov simply played rook takes e4, and Carlsen was 4 pawns down with no attacking chances and on the contrary facing a winning attack from Shirov. So poor Magnus had to resign and ended up coming second in the tournament behind Shirov, who won it. And to be fair to Shirov, he had a great tournament. He probably deserved to win it, but everyone was behind Magnus, myself included, and it was a real pity that he didn't win. But I'm sure he'll get his revenge at some tournament in the future. I hope so anyway. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave any comments or thoughts. Thanks very much.